Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Naya Karunya Gana Ganatam Prapta Sakalyana Gurnanavasya Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Prapta Sakalyana Gurnanavasya Vande Gurashi Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhya Manasura Sena Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Vajo Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Diramarjanado Shri Vigrahara Juktasya Bhaktamsya Niyunjatapi Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Chaturvidhashi Bhagavad Prasadam Satvana Truptam Hari Bhakta Shanga Chaturvidhashi Bhagavad Prasadam Kridvaiva Trupti Bhajata Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Shradikama Davayarapara Madhurya Leela Gunarupanam Shradikama Pratikshana Tanalalupasya Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Ne kunjayuno Ratikelisidhyai Jayali Virjukti Apekshaneya Ne kunjayuno Ratikelisidhyai Jayali Virjukti Apekshaneya Tatrati Daksha Ati Balavasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Sakchadharidvena Shamasta Shastri Ruktastathava Vyataiva Sadhavi Kintu Pravarja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Yasya Prasada Bhagavad Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasada Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Dhyayam Stuvam Tasya Yasatrin Sandhya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Nama O Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Sameniti Namine Nama Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatadi Shatadine Namaste Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Yaraya Namah, Krishna Jadavaya Namah, Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namah, Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita, Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavad-Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna, Shri Radha Nila Madhava Radha Nila Madhava Radhe, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Lakshmana Hanuman. Jayo Lakshmi Narasingha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasingha, Lakshmi Narasingha, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj. Nitai Gaur, Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur, Haribo. Nitai Gaur, Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur, Haribo. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Gurudev. Guru Pramanandi Haribo. Jai Vishwapar Paramsa Prabha Jagacharya Sutra Srashi Shimar's Divine Grace. Abhochar Vinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Hari Ki Jai. ISKCON Pratishta Viviti Samstapakachar Vaishnava Siramani Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patita Udhara Ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunatha Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sadguru Swami Prabhu Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री द्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय। जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जननाक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिनंदन श्रीमद गौरांग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि मावरणाय अवतार की जय। गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरिनाम संकीर्तन जय की जय। जुग धर्म हरि कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। बृहत् निदांग ट्रांसलेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपनाथ राधा कुंज श्याम कुंज गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। श्री ब्रज वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की जय। तिलो शिव श्री राधा नील माधव की जय। श्री श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जय। परम करुण श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय। श्री पुरुषोत्तम चित्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु सुभद्रदेव सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय। सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जय। भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन कृष्ण भगवान की जय। जगंगा माय जमुना माय की जय। तुलसी महारानी वृंद देव भक्ति देव की जय। श्री मथुरा दारानी की जय। समवेत भक्तविंद की जय। श्री सच्चिदानंद भक्त ठाकुर महाशय आविर्भाव तिथि महोत्सव की जय। निताय गौर हरि प्रेमानंदे। All glory to the assembly bodies. All glory to the assembly bodies. All glories to the assembly bodies. All glories, all glories, all glory to Shri Shri Guru, Shri Gauranga.
Namaste Narsingaya. Namaste Narsingaya.
Namaste Narasingaya.
Radha Radha Daine.
Radha Radha Daine.
Hiranyakashi Purvasaha.
Hiranyakashi Purvasaha.
Silatankana Kalaye.
Silatankana Kalaye.
Ito Narsingha Parito Narsingha.
Ita Nisinga Parata Nisinga
Yato yato yami tato narsinga
Yato Yato Jami Tato Nisinga
Bahe narsinga Hirdaye narsinga
Vahe Nisinga Vidaye Nisinga
Narsingamadin Sharanam Prapade
Narsingamadim Sharanam Prapade
Tava Kara Kamala Vare Nakam Adbhuta Shringa Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bringa Keshavadita Narhari Rupa Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare
Tava Kara Kamala Vare Nakam Adbhuta Shringa Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanabhinga
Keshavadita Narhari Rupa
Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare
Jaya Narsingha Dev Jaya Narsingha Dev Jaya Narsingha Dev Jaya Narsingha Dev
Jaya Nisingare Jaya Nisingare Nisingare Jaya Nisingare
Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Prahlad Maharaj
Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Prahlad Maharaj
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Gurudev
Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev
बोलो नरसिंह भगवान की जय
जय।
भक्त प्रहलाद की जय प्रभुपाद महाराज की जय
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Vai Priyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prane Devi Shatavattaye Namo Namaha Vrindai Tulasi Vai Priyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prane Devi Shatavattaye Namo Namaha Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavattaye Namo Namaha Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Kiya
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो यही अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो अभिलाषी
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
जे तुम्हारा शरण लोए तारा वंचा पूर्ण होए
तुम्हार शरण लाओ तार वंच पूर्ण
कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी
कृपा करे कर करे वृंदावनवासी
मोरा यही अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो बास
मोरा ये विलास कुंज दिया
नयने हरि बो सदा जुगल रूप राशि
नयने बसन जुगल परासी
এই নিবেদন ধারো সখীরানুগাত করো
এই নিবেদন ধার সকিরনুগত করো
সেবাধিকারা দিয়ে করো নিজ দাসী
সেবায়াধিকার দিয়ে করো নিজ দাসী
দীনা কৃষ্ণ দাসে কই এই যে না মোরা হয়ে
না কৃষ্ণ দাস কয় এই নামরা
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দা প্রেমে সদা যে না ভাসি
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দ প্রেমে সদায় নবাসী
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দা প্রেমে সদা যে না ভাসি
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দ প্রেমে সদায় নবাসী
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि Tanitani Pranasante Pradachina Panikani
Yani kani cha papani brahma hatyadikani cha tani tani pranashyanti pradakshina pade pade.
Yani kani sa papani brahma hatyadikani cha tani tani pranasante pradakshina pade pade.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani.
Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani.
Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
वृंदा देवी की जय, तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय.
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namah. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namah. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namah. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki. O Tulsi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. I desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. We will take shelter of you as wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower who carry the emissaries of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me honored servant. Is very fallen and lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always sing in love with Shri Radha and Govind, Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrinde Devi ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna ki jai. Chaito Darpanam Marjanam Bhavamada Vapanam Shri Akarvachandika Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Padipadam Sadhanam Sarvatmasnam Param Paravijayati Shri Krishna Namakari Bauda Vija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pitani Mutta Shmani Nakala Pita Vishitava Kripa Bhumunmati Durgari Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of the dust accumulated for years, and extinguishes the fire of Krishna life with repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large. God express the rays of the benediction moment. It is the light of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully test the nectar for which we're always anxious. Oh my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested your transcendental energies. There is not even a hard and fast rule for chanting these names. Oh my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, making oneself lower than a strong street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause of devotion and service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, somehow or other I am falling in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up in this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your Lord's feet. O my Lord, for will my eyes will be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? For will my voice choke out, and will the hairs and my body stand on end the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from eyes like torrent of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so. Even if sunders me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken hearted by not being present before me, he is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord and my benediction. Shri Shri Krishna Kanti. offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided, they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the body to dedicate life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the names of demigods and Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Krishna. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to the imagination. 6. To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities and strength in chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in Vedas as fruitive activity, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the friendless person about the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive for chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna. Amen. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, the devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls.
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai. Janmadhyasya yatodiviyad itaratash Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Yat Surayaha Tejo Varimidam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Misha Damna Srina Siddhani Rastakavatam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord, Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes, of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universe. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion. As one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen on fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations in the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma projita kaitrovutra, paramo nirmatsaranam satam, vedyam vastavam atra vastu, shivadam tapa trayom bhuvanam, shimad bhagavate mahamuni krite, kim vapurir ishvaraha, sadyo hridi avuridite tra, kriti bihi sususabis takshanad. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam, sukumukad amrita dravya samyatam, pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam, muhur ahoraska bhuvibhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam. The mature fruit of the desired tree Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful. Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Shinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridayam Takstohi Bhadrani Vidunati Suhit Satam. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad-Gita, is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best-wishing friend, and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. Nasta presu abhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utamasloke bhaktir bhavati naistaki. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. Tadarajastamo bhava kamalobhadayaschaye chite tarinavidam stitvam sattve prasidhati. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished. Evam prasana manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam Mukta Sangha Shijayate. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate Hridaya Grantis Chidyante Sarvasamsaya Shiyante Chasyakarmani Drista Eva Manishware. Thus Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsaya on the summer ground. Understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth Personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna. Shri Guru Vastuka prayers ki jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it. So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities. Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food. Analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavat Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava. And their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. I offer my most humble obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of my spiritual master. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Nadi Radhi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Chintamani Prakata Satma Sukalpa Vriksha Lakshavrite Susrabhira Vipalyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambrama Sevyamanam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kvananta Aravinda Dalayataksham Barhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Kandarpa Kotikamaniya Visesa Sobham Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kala Sadvanamalyavansi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shyamam Chivangalalita Niyata Prakasam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedesa Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Vayoratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Ekopya Sora Chaitam Jagaranda Kotim. Yad Shakti Rasti Jagadanda Chaya Yadanta. Yadantarasta Paramanu Chayanta. Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Yat Bhava Bhavita Dio Manajasta Taiva. Samprapyan Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusaha. Suktaryameva Nigama Pratitai Stuvanti. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitavis. Tabirya Eva Nijarupa Tayakalabi. Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhuto. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena. Santak Sadaiva Hidayesu Vilokayanti. Yashama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Rama Adi Murti Sukalani Menatistan. Nana Avatara Makarod Bhuvane Sukintu. Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramaha Pumamyo. Paramaha. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Paramaha. Yasya Prabha Prabhavata Jagadanda Koti. Kotis Yasesu Vasudadi Vibhuti Binam. Kotis Yasesu Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Ashesha Bhutam. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Maya Hiyasya Jagadanda Satani Sute. Traigunya Tad Visaya Veda Vitayamana. Sattva Valambi Parasattvam Visuddha Sattvam. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasu. Ya Praninam Pratifalam Smaratam Upepya. Lilaya Tena Bhuvanani Jayat Yajasram. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Goloka Namni Nijidamni Tale Chatasya. Devi Mahesa Haridama Sute Sutesu Te Prabhava Nichaya Te Prabhava Nichaya Vitaschayena. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Shristi Stati Pralaya Sadhava Saktireka. Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vivarti Durga. Ichanu Rupam Apiyasya Chachesta Tesa. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Shiram Yata Tadivikara Visesa Yoga. Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetaho. Yasambhutam Apitata Samapaitikaya. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Dipajat Eva Hitasantanam Abhyapetya. Dipayate Vivita Hita Samanudharma. Dipayate Vivita Hetu Samanudharma. Yastadrik Eva Hicha Vishnutaya Vibhati. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Yakarnanarna Vajale Bhajatisma Yoga. Nidramananta Jagadanda Saromukopaha. Adhara Shaktim Avalambya Param Swamurtim. Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Yasyaika Nisvasita Kala Matavalambya. Jivanti Loma Vilaja Jagadandanataha Vishnur Mahansahi Yasya Kala Vishesho Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Vasman Yatasma Sakalesu Nijesu Tejaha Swayam Kiyat Prakatayat Apitad Vedatra Brahmaya Esha Jagadanda Vidana Karta Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Palava Yugam Vinidaya Kumbha Dvandve Pranama Samayesa Ganadi Raja Vignam Vihanta Malamasya Jagat Trayasya Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahika Ganamambu Maruti Sascha Kalastatatma Manasiti Jagat Trayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Yamcha Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yachchak Suresa Savita Sakala Grahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Tejaha Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Tapapa Nichaya Sutayas Tapamsi Brahma Dikita Patagava Dayashta Jivaha Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrindra Gopa Matavendra Mahoswa Karma Bandhanu Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nirdahati Kinchucha Bhakti Karmani Nirdahati Kinchucha Bhakti Bhajam Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Krodha Kama Sahaja Pranayadi Bhitti Vatsalya Moha Guru Gora Vasevya Bhavahai Sanchintya Tasya Sadrisim Tanamapurete Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shriya Kanta Kanta Paramapurusha Kalpataravo Druma Bhumish Chintamani Ganamayi Toyam Amritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivamsi Priyasaki Chid Anandam Jyoti Param Apitad Asvadya Apicha Sayatra Shiradi Bihi Shavati Sirabi Vyascha Sumahan Nimesa Dakyo Vavrajiti Nahiyatrapi Samaya Nimesa Bhaje Sveta Dvipam Tamaham Iha Golakamitiyam Vidantaste Santakshiti Viralachara Katipaye Ishopanishad Ki Jai Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnama Adaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate Ishavaisham Vidam Sarvam Jatkinja Jagatyam Jagat Tinatak Tena Punjitaha Magritaha Kashasviddanam Kurvan evaha karmani jajiva chekchatam samaha evam tvayi nanyatetosti nakarma lipite nare Asurya namate loka andena tamasavritaha tamste pratya bigachanti yeke chatima hano janaha. Anajadika manaso javiyon aina devam apravam pravam asata davato jnana teti tistat tasmina pumata visvadadati. Vistu sarvani buddha. Tadijitita nejatita dure tadvantike tadantarasya sarvasya tadu sarvasya syabhayataha. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmani evanupasyati sarvabhutesu chatmanam tato na vichukupsate. Yasmin sarvani bhutani atmeva budvijanataha tatrako mahakaha sukha ekatvam anupasyataha. Saprayagas chukramakayam avrinam asnaviram sudam apapavidam kavir manisi paribu swayambhu yatatat yatorutan vyadadat chasvatipyaha samabhyaha. Kavir manisi paribu swayambhu yatatat yatorutan vyadadat. Andham tamaha pravisanti ye vidyam upasyate tato bhuya evate tamo ya yuvidyayam rataha. Anya devuhu vidyaya anyadahura vidyaya iti susrimadiranam inastad vichachakshide. Vidyam yasyastad vedubhayam saha avidyaya miritum tidva vidyayam ritam asnute. Antam tamaha pravisanti ye sambhutim upasyate tato bhuya evate tamo ya yusambhutam rataha. Anyadevahu sambhavad anyadahura sambhavad iti susrumadiranam yenastad vichachakshire. Sambhutim cha vinasam cha yastad vedubhayam saha vinasena militum tidva sambhutam ritamasnute. Hiranmayana patrena satyasya pitam mukam satyasya pitam mukam tattvam pusam apavrinu satyadharma yadristaye. Kusanika seyamasuya prajapatya vyuharasmin samaha tejo yatte rupam kalyanatamam tate pasyami yo savaso purushaha sohamasmi. Vayuranilam anvitam matedam basman sam sariram om kratos smara kritam smara kratos smara kritam smara. Om Agnenaya Supatara Yasman Viswani Deva Vayunani Viman Yodashmaj Churana Vino Puyastante Nama Utim Videma Om Tatsat. Srimad Bhagavatam, Antaraj Ki Jai. So today I want to finish up certain topics from the history of Prahlad Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu that I wasn't able to finish yesterday, and then we'll start with the next verse tomorrow. And also on Saturdays I will be giving like little different classes because the youth will be listening also, and I'll also assign some homework. So today I want to talk about Cantor 7, Chapter 5. And there are a series of very important verses. And the first one is Sri Prahlada Uvacha Matir Na Krishna Krishne Parata Svatova Mito Bibad Yita Griha Vatanam Adanta Gopir Vishatam Tamishram Punak Punascharvata Charvananam. This verse was quoted a lot by Srila Prabhupada, as well as the next three verses. This is Cantor 7, Chapter 5, verse number 30. Prahlad Maharaj replied. He's talking to his father, Hiranyakashipu. And his father is concerned about him because his teachers are telling him for a second time there's something wrong with your son. He's a devotee of Vishnu, and this is the second time that they're bringing this issue to Hiranyakashipu, and Hiranyakashipu is really angry, and he tells Prahlad Maharaj, he says, "You rascal, you most fallen of our family. If you have not received this education from your teachers, where have you gotten it?" So Prahlad Maharaj replies, he says, "Because of their uncontrolled senses, persons too addicted to materialistic life make progress toward hellish conditions and repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclinations toward Krishna are never aroused, either by the instruction of others or by their own efforts, or by a combination of both." So here's a 5-year-old boy talking back to his father, who's a gigantic person and most powerful man in the whole universe. He's defeated all the devatas. He's taken over the heavenly planets. He's caused havoc. The devatas are dispersed in fear of him, right? And they're hiding somewhere in the universe. And here this little 5-year-old boy is not afraid at all of taking on his dad, who he considers a demon. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, in this verse, the words Matir Na Krishna refer to devotional service rendered to Krishna. So-called politicians, erudite scholars, and philosophers who read Bhagavad-Gita try to twist some meaning from it to suit their material purposes. But their misunderstandings of Krishna will not yield them any profit, because such politicians, philosophers, and scholars are interested in using Bhagavad-Gita as a vehicle for adjusting things materially. For them, constant thought of Krishna or Krishna consciousness is impossible. Matir na Krishna. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 18:55, Bhaktya mam abhijanati, yavanyastasmi tatpato. This verse says, only through devotional service can one understand Krishna as he is. The so-called politicians and scholars think of Krishna as fictitious. The politician says that his Krishna is different from the Krishna depicted in Bhagavad Gita. Not only politicians say that. The Sikhs, the modern Sikhs, who are the radicals, they say, well, we are chanting these bhajans in this Granth Sahib, to Krishna and Rama. But the Krishna and Rama in the Granth Sahib is different than the Krishna and Rama of the Hindus. They're complete nonsense, right? So, the politician says that his Krishna is different from the Krishna depicted in Bhagavad-Gita. Even though he accepts Krishna and Rama as the supreme, he thinks of Rama and Krishna as impersonal because he has no idea of service to Krishna. Thus, his only business is punas charvita charvananam, chewing the chewed again and again. The aim of such politicians and academic scholars is to enjoy this material world with their bodily senses. Therefore, it is clearly stated here that those who are griha vrata, whose only aim is to live comfortably with the body in the material world, cannot understand Krishna. The two expressions, griha vrata and charvita charvananam, indicate that a materialistic person tries to enjoy sense gratification in different bodily forms, life after life, but is still unsatisfied. In the name of personalism, this ism or that ism, such persons always remain attached to the materialistic way of life, as stated in Bhagavad-Gita 2:44, Bhogaisvarya prasaktanam tayaparata chetasam vyavasat mika buddhi ikaha samadana vidyate. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. Those who are attached to material enjoyment cannot be fixed in devotional service to the Lord. They cannot understand Bhagavan, Krishna, or his instruction. Bhagavad-Gita. Adanta Gopir, Vishatam, Tamishram. Their path actually leads toward hellish life. As confirmed by Rishabhadev, Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimukte. One must try to understand Krishna by serving a devotee. The word Mahat refers to a devotee. So that Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimukte means that the serving a great devotee opens the door of liberation for the disciple. Dwaram is door, Ahur Vimukte opens it up for liberation. And the word Mahat refers to a devotee. Mahatmanas tumam partha daivim pakritim asritaha bhajanti ananya manaso gyatva bhutadim avyayam. It's a Bhagavad Gita verse 9:13. O son of Prita, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. Bhagavad Gita 9:13. A Mahatma is one who is constantly engaged in devotional service 24 hours a day, as explained in the following verses. Unless one adheres to such a great personality, one cannot understand Krishna. Hiranyakashipu wanted to know where Prahlada had gotten this Krishna consciousness. Who had taught him? Prahlada sarcastically replied, "My dear father, persons like you never understand Krishna. One can understand Krishna only by serving a Mahat, a great soul. Those who try to adjust material conditions are said to be chewing the chewed. No one has been able to adjust material conditions, but life after life, generation after generation, people try and repeatedly fail unless one is properly trained by a Mahat, a Mahatma, or unalloyed devotee of the Lord. There is no possibility of one's understanding Krishna and his devotional service." So this is a very powerful purport, very surcharged back and forth here between Prahlad Maharaj and his father. But Prahlad Maharaj continues, "Nate vidu swatagatim hi Vishnum durasaya ye bahir artamanina andayatandar upaniyamanas tepisitantriyam urudam nibadha." Persons who are strongly entrapped by the consciousness of enjoying material life and who have therefore accepted as their leader or guru a similar blind man attached to external sense objects, cannot understand that the goal of life is to return home back to Godhead and engage in the service of Lord Vishnu. As blind men, guided by another blind man, miss the right path and fall into a ditch, materially attached men led by another materially attached man are bound by the ropes of fruitive labor, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering the threefold miseries. This is a very big verse. Prabhupada often quoted this verse also. And in the purport, Prabhupada writes, since there must always be a difference of opinion between demons and devotees, Hiranyakashipu, when criticized by his son Prahlada Maharaja, should not have been surprised that Prahlad Maharaj differed from his way of life, from, in other words, his father's way of life. Nonetheless, Hiranyakashipu was extremely angry and wanted to rebuke his son for deriding his teacher or spiritual master, who had been born in the Brahmana family of the great Acharya, Sukracharya. The word Sukra means semen, and Acharya refers to a teacher or guru. Hereditary gurus, or spiritual masters, in other words, family gurus, or spiritual masters, have been accepted everywhere since time immemorial, but Prahlada Maharaj declined to accept such a seminal guru, the guru of semen, right, like a family guru, or take instruction from him. An actual guru is Shrotriya, one who has heard or received perfect knowledge through parampara, the disciplic succession. Therefore, Prahlada Maharaj did not recognize a seminal or family spiritual master. Such spiritual masters are not at all interested in Vishnu. Indeed, they are hopeful of material success. Bahir Artha Manina. The word Bahi means external. Artha means interest. And Manina means taking very seriously. Generally speaking, practically everyone is unaware of the spiritual world. The knowledge of the materialist is restricted within the 4 billion mile limit of this material world. So 4 billion miles refers to the diameter of the material universe. The Bhagavatam gives a specific number, which is in the dark portion of the creation. They do not know that beyond the material world is the spiritual world. Unless one is a devotee of the Lord, one cannot understand the existence of the spiritual world. Gurus, teachers who are simply interested in this material world are described in this verse as andha, blind. Such blind men may lead many other blind followers without true knowledge of material conditions, but they are not accepted by devotees like Prahlad Maharaja. Such blind teachers, being interested in the external material world, are always bound up by the strong ropes of material nature. So this is a very important verse. And now the what you call icing on the cake is the next verse. Naisam matistavad udakra magrinim sprisat anartha pagamo yadartha mahiya sampada rajo bisekam nikinschananam navrinitayavad. Unless they smear upon their bodies the dust of the lotus feet of a Vaishnava completely freed from material contamination, persons very much inclined toward materialistic life cannot be attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, who is glorified for his uncommon activities. Only by becoming Krishna conscious and taking shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, in this way can one be freed from material contamination. This is a wonderful verse, and it has a wonderful purport. And Prabhupada touches a theme that I've talked about many times in this purport. So he says, becoming Krishna conscious brings about anartha apagama, the disappearance of all anarthas. Anarthas means unwanted things, bad habits. The miserable conditions we have unnecessarily accepted. The material body is the basic principle of these unwanted, miserable conditions. The entire Vedic civilization is meant to relieve one from these unwanted miseries, but persons bound by the laws of nature do not know the destination of life. As described in the previous verse, Isatantriyam urudam nibadha. They are conditioned by the three strong modes of material nature. The education that keeps the conditioned soul bound life after life is called material education. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has explained that materialistic education expands the influence of Maya. Such an education induces the conditioned soul to be increasingly attracted to materialistic life and to stray further and further away from liberation from unwanted miseries. One may ask why highly educated persons do not take to Krishna consciousness. The reason is explained in this verse. Unless one takes shelter of a bona fide, fully Krishna conscious spiritual master, there is no chance of understanding Krishna. The educators, scholars, and big political leaders worshipped by millions of people cannot understand the goal of life and take to Krishna consciousness, for they have not accepted a bona fide spiritual master and the Vedas. Therefore, in the Mundaka Upanishad 3.2.3, it is said, Nayamatma pravarchanena labhyo na medaya na bahuna shrutena. One cannot become self-realized simply by having an academic education. By presenting lectures in an erudite way, pravarchanena labhya, or by being an intelligent scientist who discovers many wonderful things. One cannot understand Krishna unless one is graced by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Only one who has surrendered to a pure devotee of Krishna and taking the dust of his lotus feet can understand Krishna. First, one must understand how to get out of the clutches of Maya. The only means is to become Krishna conscious. And to become Krishna conscious very easily, one must take shelter of a realized soul, a Mahat or Mahatma, whose only interest is to engage in the service of the Supreme Lord. As the Lord says in Bhagavad-Gita 9:13, Mahatmanas tumam parta daivim pakritim asritaha bhajanti ananyamanaso yatva bhutadim avyayam. O son of Prita, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. Therefore, to end the unwanted miseries of life, one must become a devotee. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavat yakinchana sarver gunais tatra samasate sura. One who has unflinching devotional faith in Krishna consistently manifests all the good qualities of Krishna and the demigods. Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, 18th chapter, 12th verse. Yasya deve parabhaktir yata deve tata guru tasyaite kati tahi artak prakasante mahatmana. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. Svetasvatara Upanishad 6.23. And then, Yam evaisha vrinute tena labhyas tasyaisa atma vrinute tanam span. Is that the same verse that he quoted earlier? Okay. The Lord is obtained only by one whom he himself chooses. To such a person, he manifests his own form. Mundaka Upanishad 3.2.3. These are the Vedic injunctions. One must take shelter of a self-realized spiritual master, not a materially educated scholar or politician. One must take shelter of niskinchana, a person engaged in devotional service and free from material contamination. That is the way to return home, back to Godhead. So, what's interesting is this connects to Bhakti Chiru Maharaj, who quit going to college in the first year of his college education to become a chemist or a chemistry expert. And he realized that he was not satisfied with this material education, that there was something better than this, and he wanted to find it. And he eventually traveled a little bit, and then eventually ended up back in India, and he went to Rishikesh, Haridwar, and Badrinath, and still didn't find what he was looking for. So he came back. And by the way, this is almost exactly the same thing that Gaur Govinda Maharaj did. And then he ended up somehow in Mayapur, and he met the devotees, and the devotees introduced him to Prabhupada. Is it Vrindavan? Oh, okay. But he ended up in Mayapur. Maybe his first meeting with the devotees was in Vrindavan. And he then was taken by the devotees to the Kumbh Mela where Prabhupada was. And anyway, he then was asked by Prabhupada to translate his books, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, into Bengali language, and then also to become his personal secretary and answer letters. So he became trained directly by Prabhupada, and his education was Srimad Bhagavatam. By translating it, and every day he would have to show his translation to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would oversee it and explain things to him. So his education, his higher education, was Srimad Bhagavatam, which made him into what he was, a genuine devotee, a genuine follower of Prabhupada and Krishna consciousness. So he didn't go to college, but he got a better education by learning Srimad Bhagavatam directly from Prabhupada himself. So this should be an enlightening understanding of what is real education and what is nonsense education. What kids are receiving in the universities, in the high schools, in the elementary schools, middle schools, is nonsense. It just takes them away from Krishna. It makes them lose faith that there's a God and that his name is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That whole education is condemned by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Prabhupada. And you can hear it in his words. Look what he says. He says that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has explained that materialistic education expands the influence of Maya. Such an education induces the conditioned soul to be increasingly attracted to materialistic life and to stray further and further away from liberation from unwanted miseries. Now he's not mincing his words here. I mean, this is serious indictment of material education by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. One may ask why highly educated persons do not take to Krishna consciousness. The reason is explained in this verse. Unless one takes shelter of a bona fide, fully Krishna conscious spiritual master, there is no chance of understanding Krishna. The educators, scholars, and big political leaders worshipped by millions of people, cannot understand the goal of life and take to Krishna consciousness, for they have not accepted a bona fide spiritual master and the Vedas. Therefore, in the Mundaka Upanishad 3.2.3, it is said, Nayam Atma Pravarchanena Labhyo Na Medaya Na Bahuna Shrutena. One cannot become self-realized simply by having an academic education, by presenting lectures in an erudite way, Pravarchanena Labhyaha, or by being an intelligent scientist who discovers many wonderful things. One cannot understand Krishna unless one is graced by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Only one who has surrendered to a pure devotee of Krishna and taking the dust of his lotus feet can one understand Krishna. First, one must understand how to get out of the clutches of Maya. The only means is to become Krishna conscious. And to become Krishna conscious very easily, one must take shelter of a realized soul, a Mahat or Mahatma, whose only interest is to engage in the service of the Lord, as the Lord says in Bhagavad-Gita 9:13. So he can't be any clearer than this. This is condemning modern education that teaches people to become materialists and to try and enjoy material nature and to adjust things so that they will be free of misery. But misery comes anyway, no matter how good their adjustment is. Misery comes anyway. And the threefold miseries, adi, atmika, adi, bodhika, adi, daivika, cannot be avoided, no matter how good their material plans are, or how good their medicines are, or how good their techniques are. They will not stop birth, death, old age, and disease. And we see it. All these great scientists and scholars and medicine men and all that, they all die. And they usually die pitifully. And they have to take birth again because they're not Krishna conscious. So what good is their education? It's zero. It's not good at all. Well, and we have examples like Gaur Govinda Maharaj and especially Bhakti Charu Maharaj. They were educated in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad-Gita by Srila Prabhupada himself. And look what they did. They accomplished tremendous, wonderful things. And Gopal Krishna Maharaj also. He graduated college. He was engaged in business in a big company, and he gave it up. He gave it up and became a devotee. And he followed Prabhupada. And Radhanath Swami also. He was basically a hippie, but he gave it all up, and he was not interested in mundane knowledge, and he was seeking knowledge from a guru, and found Prabhupada. Right? And look how successful all these people are. Much more successful than if they took up a career in IT or in business or whatever. So we should think about this. We should think about it. All the examples are there. Right? What's wrong with our son or our daughter becoming a devotee, being trained in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and becoming a preacher? Is there something wrong with that? That's what all of us did in early days. We realized we're not going to be integrated into the material world. And therefore, we just joined Krishna consciousness and became devotees full time. Right? And we're able to see the dramatic growth of Krishna consciousness all over the world. Okay, so these are some points. Now, the homework. Are there anybody listening?
Yeah, I got 8 people on YouTube.
Okay. So, therefore, homework is to look up the history of Bhakti Charu Maharaj, Gaur Govinda Maharaj, Radhanath Swami, Gopal Krishna Goswami, and see what their training was in life, and map their training. Did they go to school? I mean, did they go to college? Did they get a college degree? Did they work outside? And at what point they gave it all up and became devotees. See? And see how they actually succeeded tremendously because they studied under Prabhupada and learned Bhagavad-Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and became preachers. So map out their what you call their epiphany, their awakening, and their trajectory in life, and how they gave up material life completely and totally surrendered to Prabhupada and served Prabhupada, and look at what they achieved. I mean, last night we heard all the things Bhakti Churu Maharaj achieved. But you can do this, you can map out also all the things Gopal Krishna Maharaj has achieved, and Radhanath Swami has achieved, and Gaur Govinda Maharaj has achieved. Right? So it's very instructive to see what is real success and what is phony adjustment of trying to adjust the material world with science or philosophy or business or whatever. And you'll see that real success is becoming a devotee. And false success is becoming a materialist. Like Hiranyakashipu, who was tremendously successful, but he lost everything. Or Ravana, who was tremendously successful. And Ravana was an IT guy. He had a very high-class education. He knew how to build a tunnel from Sri Lanka to Brazil to mine gold and bring it back, and other precious metals, and bring it back to build his town called Lanka. You see. So he was not a dumb person. He was very smart, and highly educated. His father was a Brahmana. But all these big guys, Kamsa was another one, they all failed because they were not positive devotees. They were negative devotees. They were always thinking of Krishna, but in a negative way. So when you think of Krishna in a positive way and follow the instructions of bona fide gurus and the parampara, you will be the most successful person. And we have examples of it, like Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, we have Parikshit Maharaj, we have also Yudhisthira Maharaj. We can go down the list. It's a huge list of them, of people who became tremendously successful, and it was perpetual success. And they all went back to Godhead. Arjuna, the Pandavas, Draupadi, and Kunti Devi, and Shilavati. There's a whole list of people who, and then the Goswamis, and another important point, and this is something I'm going to talk about tomorrow. Prabhupada says that there are, of course, 12 major Mahatmas, right? So you have Brahma and Narada and Shiva and Kumaras and Kapila and Manu and Prahlad Maharaj and Janaka and Bhisma and Bali and Sukadeva Goswami and Yamaraj. But he says the modern Mahatmas, like the 6 Goswamis and others that he names, he said they're more important than the previous Mahatmas. Therefore, we should be following them. Now, look who he's talking about. He's talking about people like Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, who were extremely wealthy people and gave it all up and moved to Vrindavan under the advisement of Lord Chaitanya and excavated all the places of Krishna's pastime and reinvigorated Vrindavan and wrote all these tremendous books about pure love of Krishna. So here we see again, their success was giving up material opulence and living extremely simply and austerely and being completely immersed in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada said, these are the modern Mahajans, and they're more important or more significant for us than the previous Mahajans. That does not belittling the previous Mahajans, but it's just, he's saying that we should base our culture and our understanding of Krishna consciousness with these modern Mahajans, right? And then you go down the list, Raghunath Goswami is extremely rich. He gave it all up. He gave up basically eating and sleeping, you know, and he attained the highest pinnacle of love of God. And then Raghunath Bhatta Goswami also, whose eyes were always wet with tears of love for Lord Krishna, Lord Chaitanya. And Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who was a Sri Vaishnava, but dedicated his life completely to Lord Chaitanya. And Jiva Goswami is the greatest scholar in the history of the world, right? They were all became mendicants. You know, if you hear the prayers of Sat Goswami, they were all mendicants. They had just a simple loincloth or a dhoti, and that was it. They didn't even have stitched clothing. And they slept on a different tree every night, so not to be attached to any place. And they hardly even slept and hardly ate. And they attained tremendous success. Unbelievable. They were able to build these big temples, even though the Muslims were in control of rocks and marble and everything at that time. They knew how to negotiate with them and build these temples. But their lifestyle never changed. They continued to sleep under trees and basically hardly sleep at all. And they hardly eat anything. So we have to understand the life of great devotees, and then we will not be fooled by modern education and see how actually it's very dangerous, because it just leads people away from Krishna, not toward Krishna. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? Yeah.
So Maharaj, as you mentioned that, materialistic education is not good for our progress and all those things. So, yeah, I agree on that, but in being in the materialistic world, everyone supposed to be like a brahmachari or started like spiritual path. So, but we still have the basic needs of our day-to-day being in the material world, like we need food, we need shelter and all those things. So how, because if you have the brahmachari, Brahman, you go and in our 4 varnashrama, or we go to other people, gastas, to get the like food or something like bhiksha or something. So everybody is trying to be on that path. So how it will work out?
Well, this is a traditional question that people ask. If everybody becomes Krishna conscious, how will things continue?
Yeah.
They always ask that question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you think that this is the only way to live. But this was not like this before. You go back 100 years and you see that even Americans were not living like this. They were living little farms, and they were producing their own food. And there were not these big, gigantic cities and big, gigantic businesses, and, and factories and things like that. That all started maybe a little long before 100 years, but maybe you have to go back 150, 200 years. But there was a very simple life that people were living, even in the United States. So this country has only been existing officially for about close to 250 to 300 years, right? This is relatively a new country, right? But it only began with the Industrial Revolution in like 1830s, 1840s, this industrialization, and then people leaving the farms and coming to big cities and building these gigantic factories. And because America wanted to emulate England, which had the factories and had industry going on before the United States. So this life that we see today is an artificial life. It's not a sustainable model for people to live in. It's getting more and more difficult to maintain it. Right? Just like now, the supply chain has been broken for a lot of products, and therefore the price of food is going up. The price of all kinds of so-called essential things are going up, right? And we can see how just one virus can disrupt a whole country. So you see, this is not a sustainable model. It can go on for some time, but it's going to deteriorate. So what are you going to do then? Let's see. This model the sustainable model was before the industrialization, where people were living on small farms, and they were growing their own food, and they believed in God, and they came to the United States to have religious freedom. That's how the country started. People left Europe, which was becoming corrupted, and they came here to have religious freedom, to practice their religion without being harassed by the government. So you have to understand how this country started and what was the purpose. It was to give people freedom to practice religion. What is the Constitution of the United States? Which, by the way, today there's a movement to cancel the Constitution of the United States. There is. More and more people think we should do away with it. What does it do? It guarantees, number one, freedom of religion. You understand? That's how the country started. And on every dollar it says, "In God we trust," right? But you see there's a change of culture now. People want to cancel all that. So it's not a sustainable model. And can you continue in a different way? Of course you can. People lived in a different way before. Even in India, they lived in a different way. All the villages in India, and there were thousands and thousands of them, they were all self-sufficient. They didn't have to import things. The British started this importation thing, They took the cotton from India and sent it to Manchester and turned it into dhotis and sold it back to the Indians, And Gandhi was against that whole thing. There was just exploitation, So many people came to India to exploit India because it was a rich country. And basically an agricultural country. It didn't have big, gigantic cities before. So don't think that it's impossible to imagine any other way of living than what we see today. That's not a fact. The world will go on without Amazon and without Microsoft. They will come and go. So that's a false question. Because we have the example, you can go back millions of years and you see people were living. Right? The Ramayana goes back 1.7 million years ago. And they were living just fine. And people were happy. So that's not a real question. We can live in a different way, even today. And you'll see, you never imagined that you would work from home for 2 years. Right? If someone said, "Oh, you're going to be working from home for 2 years," no, that's not possible, right? Look what happened. Right? And then you say, "Well, your kids are not going to go to school anymore. They're going to just study at home." He said, "No, that's not possible." It happened. I've been telling you, you can educate your kids at home. You don't have to send them to school, right? And no, everyone said, no, that's not Pai. He's talking nonsense, right? It happened. So this is not a question. This is a desperate attempt to keep the status quo because we're attached to it. But no, it's going to be ruined, and you'll be forced. But better you do it voluntarily and intelligently. The downsizing, because people will be forced to do it in the future. Just like recently in Tennessee, there was this terrible flood, right? And there's a video of the lady who's making a video of the flood coming past her house, right? She said, "Wow, it looks really dangerous," And she's in her house, right? And then all of a sudden, the flood takes her house and she dies. And they have the video that she made, right? And then you see the flood going by and she said, "Wow, it looks really dangerous." And all of a sudden, the house is taken and everything is destroyed. You see? So don't think that this is the only way to live. It could easily be destroyed. So therefore, you should plan. What's your plan in case such a thing happens? Do you have a plan? If you say, "No, well, how can the world go on without this?" Well, it's going to be destroyed for sure, right? So what's your plan? We have this. This was Prabhupada's thing. He wanted the grihastas to live on farms and produce their own food and be self-sufficient. He didn't say close the temples, because if the temples are functioning, then even the cities won't be destroyed. You see, because the devotees were trying to convince Prabhupada. They said, "Oh well, Prabhupada, it's prophesied that California is going to fall into the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and so all these big cities are going to get destroyed." And Prabhupada said, "That's nonsense. If you are chanting Hare Krishna and practicing Krishna consciousness, then you will save Los Angeles from going into the ocean." Right? And he said, don't worry about that. Just continue your preaching. They were saying we got to close the temple and move up to the mountains in eastern California. And some people did that, of course. Anyway, see, that's a non-question, because people can live in a different way as they did before. And society functioned just right, nicely. It was ideal with Lord Ramachandra and Yudhisthira and all these great kings. So we could go back to a completely different model of life. And you would probably be a lot happier, a lot more peaceful. Hare Krishna. Okay. So, chant. You want to chant? Use the microphone.
Sri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Sri Guru Charana
Padma Kevala Bhakati Bandhumoi Savadanamate
Bandhumoi Savadanamate
Jahara Prasade Bhai Bhavaturiya Jai Krishna prapti hoy jahate
Krishna prapti hoye
Guru mukha padma vakya chitte koriya kya Harana kori ho mane asha Shri Guru charane rati se uttama gati Prasade pure sarvasha
Ye prasade pure sarvasha
Ye prasade pure sarvasha
Ye prasade pure
चक्षुदान दिल दे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिल दे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित
दिव्य ज्ञान दे प्रकाशित
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
प्रेम भक्ति जाओ
वेदे गाय जहरा चरितो
वेदे गाय जहरा चरितो
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अजम जनर बंधु
गुरु करुणा
लोकना लोकेरा जीवाना लोकना लोकेरा जीवाना
लोकना लोकेरा जीवाना
आह प्रभु कुरु दया देह मोरे पद छाया
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 प्रभु कुरु दया देह मोरे पद छाया त्रिभुवाना श्रील प्रभुपाद पतित पावाना गुरुदेव लोयल शराना Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, 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 Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Bhakta Vrinda Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Om Vishnupad Paramansa Parvajagachasta Tarasatarashi Shishimari's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakuti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Samakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi All glories to assembled Devotee. All glories to assembled Devotee. All glories to assembled Devotee. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavana Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Vishnu Namaste Saraswati Devi. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we contain a pure devotional service. I bow down to this lotus feet in great honor of reverence. By His grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from His lotus feet. Attachment to His lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord's birth after birth. From Him ecstatic emanates. By Him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of His character. Our spiritual master, the ocean mercy, friend of the poor and Lord and master of devotees. Oh, Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavan, Kiche, Nama Om Vishnu Pada. Krishna Presta, Bhuttini Shamanti Bhakti. Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pacharini, Nirvisesa, Vaskati Shri Krishna Chaitanya.
One question I don't want to
Yeah, go
ask again. See, I was listening 7.5.30.
Yeah.
See, one question is here. See, it says, this is all offenses, before doing the puja. Where we got doubt is to offer worship to the deity without worshiping the Vaikuntha devotee like Ganesha. Why we don't do the puja then?
To offer worship to the deity without worshiping the Vaikuntha deities. No. Well, see, this is something you have to learn. That is, that when you're worshiping Krishna, especially when Krishna appears in the material world, all the devas are within the Lord.
Okay.
Because He's the origin of them all.
Okay.
They all coming from Him. So they all appear with Him in His body. So
Yeah,
when
but
you worship,
why Prabhupada is writing like
what?
this? Why Prabhupada is writing in this?
No, but this is he's writing what the acharyas or previous acharyas
Yeah,
have said.
we probably that's where we got out. Myself and Gayatri, we listen right every day, and when you mentioned that, we got, hey, what is this? Why we were doing earlier, we stopped it now, and we were a little puzzled.
Like I said, I'm going to show you where it directly says this.
Okay.
And when Krishna appears, all the demigods are within His body,
Okay.
as well as all expansions such as Narayana and Vishnu. They're all within His body. So when you worship Krishna, they're all satisfied.
Yeah, but doing puja to Ganesha is not a offense. We listen. It is there, Maharaj, in the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah, but okay, so
That I can tell you you covered on Thursday, I think.
what?
You covered that part on Thursday or Wednesday, I think.
Which one?
This particular.
Oh yeah. All the different
offenses,
rules.
different
yeah.
rules, offenses.
Yeah. Well, see, we're not keeping it a secret, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but
So I have to show you the quote where it says, "When Krishna appears, all the incarnations appear with Him, within His body, because they're all coming from Him, as also the demigods."
correct, yeah. It's part and parcel of
Yeah.
Krishna. Yeah.
So if you worship Him, they're all satisfied.
Yeah.
But if you want to do it anyway, the right way is first you offer the prasadam to Krishna, then you offer to the
Okay.
demigod, or you can offer to your ancestors also.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Thank you very much.
What is not bona fide is worshiping them as independent gods.
Independent God without any, yeah, okay.
By even worshiping Lakshmi Devi without Narayana, it's not so
Not a good thing.
not a good thing to do.
Okay.
Because then she becomes chansal.
Yeah.
Not steady. She's only steady when she's with her husband.
Thank you.